Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Kane's independent media production. Today, we're talking about how to maximize the range of tensions you can get out of your snare wires without choking your drum out. Over the course of things, we've done a lot of different kinds of videos on the channel here, and one of our favorites is things that we consider to be hacks or, surprise solutions to an issue that you're having, or maybe solutions to an issue you didn't even know you were really experiencing. One that we run into a lot is that we have all of this room in our snare mechanism to adjust the tension of the wires, and there's all of this stuff at the low tension that's not really usable, and in particular, things in the higher tension that again are taking us to a place of choky, kind of ugly sounds out of the drum. We'll talk about a few different facets to this as we move through this experiment, but the first thing we want to do is hear this drum with its normal setup that we're accustomed to hearing here at the studio. For the purposes of today, we're not tuning super high, we're not doing anything really out of the ordinary, but we're about to. Now, a long time ago, I found myself in a situation where I couldn't get access to the wires that I wanted from my drum, and I ended up having to buy a set of 13-inch wires to put onto a 14-inch drum. Depending on what wires you buy these days, there is a lot of wiggle room inside of just the 14-inch length, according to what the package says. Some of them are a little bit longer, some are a little bit shorter. But there's actually a whole other thing when you jump away from the ones that are actually the right size for your drum and start to experiment with those that are actually intended for a smaller shell. Just to get an idea of what we're talking about with the correctly sized wires for this drum, want to move through a few different tensions on the wires and play the drum in real time so you can hear it moving from a little too loose to choky and a little too tight. A lot of players that I love on the scene right now who are doing amazing things, when I get an opportunity to check out their instruments, I'm often surprised at how they actually sound in front of me when I get to hit them and kind of see how they're going to get their sound out of those drums that day, which often is also backline kits or maybe drums that they haven't gotten to work with very much and they have to get a sound as quickly as they possibly can. Surprisingly to us, there are a lot of incredible professional performers at the top of their game who actually don't really know a whole lot about how to manipulate the sound of the drums they're using via tuning and snare wire adjustments and things like that. Their life is about the performance and about the energy and about the music, but little things kind of get lost by the wayside with the kit that with a little bit of fussing around could elevate the performance and possibly inspire it even more. What we're going to do today is leave the tuning on this drum entirely alone, but we're going to take off the 14-inch wires and we're going to install wires for a 13-inch drum onto this one. A couple of things to note, first of all, is that the stock strings or straps may not work in this situation, and we have a big kind of wad of string to tie these on. If you want to experiment with this, make sure you have at least something a little bit longer than what comes with the wires when you buy them, because you may not actually have enough slack to be able to affix them to the drum, depending on the mechanism you're using. The wires we're using today are Pure Sound Custom Pros, which actually come with a proprietary and super cool strap mounting mechanism, which again, we actually can't use for this situation because of that distance. So we're using string with them, and they work awesome this way as well. Let's hear how these wires sound, again at sort of a medium tension, similar to where the 14s were. No tuning has changed. This is exactly the same sounding drum apart from the wires. Now, this is not turning this drum into a different drum sound-wise. We're still dealing with the same set of variables. We just changed the wires. But the big takeaway here is that even putting 13s on this drum, when people are already arguing about tiny increments of different length in 14-inch wires, it's totally functional. It sounds really good. It feels really good. But it's also going to offer us some options that we couldn't get with the 14s. Now let's go through a similar kind of low to high wire tension experiment like we did earlier with the 14s. Now, where we had the 14s earlier, I was able to get them to choke the drum out very easily with still a lot of wiggle room in the mechanism to go way past that amount of tension into an area where playing low to the drum sounded really, really terrible. Comparatively here, I actually maxed out the tension on the mechanism, and I'm still not experiencing choking here. This is the thing that is so cool about experimenting with different lengths of snare wires. Because we're dealing with a shorter set, the whole apparatus of the wires is moved closer to the center, and we have more string on the ends as it wraps around the edge of the drum. What this allows us to do is add an extraordinary amount of tension to the wires without choking out the bottom head and thus the top head. Despite what you may also think, having wires that don't go all the way to the edge of the drum is not drastically changing the sensitivity to the edge of the drum. The whole behavior of the drum is changing in ways that are super interesting, but we're not really losing things towards the edge, which initially before I had tried this out, I thought might be the place where we would be making some kind of concession in the sound. For anybody out there who's new to the idea of choking out a snare drum with the snare wires, just really quickly, what we're talking about there is applying enough tension with the wires to the bottom head that we're starting to stifle the resonance of the drum and destroy the sensitivity that we want to have through the top head down into the wires. This can be a difficult concept to sort of telegraph through video and even through audio through a screen like this, but if you sit down at your drum and you tap it in the center very, very low, ½ inch to an inch off of the drum very gently, and you're not getting clean snare wire response and maybe hearing a bouncy, boingy kind of sound, and then as you hit harder, the snares start to engage, this is one of the main attributes of a choked out situation. With this drum, a Supraphonic, generally speaking, it's very easy to make it sound good. It does have a wide range of both tuning and tensions that'll work with the snare mechanism. However, with the standard wires, I would probably be making snare wire adjustments and tuning adjustments in tandem to get everything to work together. In the case of using the 13-inch wires, I can actually go from a much lower tension on the wires and get a good sound up to way tighter and ultimately get a situation where I can play super gently in the center of the drum and get tons of articulation that isn't choky or boingy like I was talking about earlier, and then move to the edge, hit a rim shot, and then that's not choked out either. It's a completely different feel, and it also goes to recording and to microphones in a much more pleasant manner if you're looking for a situation where you need a lot of articulation without choking out. Like many of our videos, we did a lot of extra playing today, and if you'd like to check out the extended demos as well as anecdotes about these things, jump over to the Patreon. The link is below. It's really keeping us alive right now. There's a lot of tiers, a lot of options. Hopefully there's something there for you. Head over there, check it out, and we'll hope to see you there. I think like a lot of us, when I was first starting out, I was more excited about playing and hitting things the way I wanted than actually expanding my dynamic range or my stylistic range or any of those sorts of things. I was just really excited to play. And as time went on and I started doing other sorts of sessions and other sorts of gigs, I found myself in situations where I needed a drum that was really giving me a beautiful sound at my very lowest dynamic, and then also gave me a beautiful sound at as aggressive as I could hit it, really. And times in my life when I was dealing with or studying with classical percussionists, I realized that there was a lot to learn from their idea of an orchestral snare drum sound too. Not that we would necessarily use that sound, but that they need to have an enormous dynamic range that's functional inside of a very large band as well. For people like, playing in bands and things like that or doing sessions, we're not always in the middle of 40 or 50 or 80 people, but at the same time, playing small rooms, playing intimate situations, or just wanting to only use one snare drum for a lot of different situations, the maximum amount of dynamic range is only going to make our lives easier, and it means that we have to practice playing softly and loudly, but we do also have to figure out how to make the drum give us what we need in those situations and make our lives as easy as possible so that we don't have to worry about that as well. Now, if the music that you make is, generally speaking, swinging for the fences, big backbeats and big fills and living in one dynamic range, this may not actually affect your experience at all, and that's totally fine. But on the other hand, if you are doing music where this kind of range is super important and you need to have access to all of these different sounds at the drop of a hat, this could actually be kind of a sea change for your playing experience with your snare drum, whether it's a Supraphonic or whatever it is that you happen to use. It's also worth mentioning that we only played sticks today, but brush response, rods, broomsticks, anything like that, this is all going to affect the behavior of any implement you use when you play the drum. We get a lot of comments about, why don't you guys have 1 million followers? Why don't you have 1 million views? There's a reason for that, and it's actually that we need people out there to like the videos, to comment on them, to subscribe, to share them, comment a lot if you want to. Make sure that we are getting attention that YouTube is going to see so that we can move up in the ranks so that people who don't know about us can see the videos. It's really, really helpful if you can do those things. Hit the notification bell so you know when our new videos are coming out. We've got a lot of stuff coming out. And then secondarily, jump over to the Patreon, check out all the extra stuff that we've got going on over there. The Cymbals series is still flying. We're super excited about that. And lastly, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody else besides me put shorter wires on a larger drum. If you've ever done that, or if you've run into a drum that had that on there, we'd really love to hear your stories about that, because this is actually one of those things that's not supposed to work. And it doesn't just work, it actually does something really useful.